welcome everybody today. I have a number of people here in person as well as online. It is an absolute pleasure to see everyone today. And it's an even greater pleasure to introduce our guest of honor, Diana DiFranco. Diana is a licensed clinical social worker, and she does a great deal of work with experiences, helping them reintegrate into society after their mind-blowing experience. She herself had a shared death experience some time ago. I believe it was with her mother, and she's going to tell us about that. And then she's going to transition over to explaining the process to help people reintegrate. So this is perfect for any experiences joining us today. And then we're going to open it up to Q&A. Just a quick housekeeping matter before we get going. I think we have some new people. Just want to let you know that you're welcome in the Q&A session at the end to ask questions, but just bear in mind this is being recorded, and this recording will eventually go on our YouTube IANDS channel. So this will be open to the public. So if you want to protect your privacy, but still want to ask a question, make sure that your video camera is off. And if you want to ask a question, you can do so through chat. If you don't mind being seen on camera, you can just lift your hand and we'll get to you at the end. Those of you who are here can actually write your questions and give them to me. You can come up to the mic and ask the question in real time as well. So I hope that that's clear. But other than that, I think we can just go ahead and hand it over to Diana. So Diana, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Angie, thank you so much. It is an honor and a pleasure for me to be here and talking about such an important human experience. I'm going to start by quickly saying that the near-death experience is a human phenomenon that has been reported for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. We could go back as to, is in the Bible, Greek philosophers reported it, like Plato. So this phenomenon has existed forever, and is interesting that even nowadays, as a therapist, occasionally I hear somebody talking about their experience and saying to me that when they shared their experience, initially they were not believed, and instead they were pathologized. And in some really sad situations, people are put in mental hospital, which is unbelievable, with this phenomenon and the near-death experience being out even in the media. So I'm going to start also by saying that the near-death experience, the term was coined by Dr. Raymond Moody back in 1975 or 76, when he wrote the book Life After Life, which was translated in many, many different languages, and it was a bestseller. So he coined the term, and shortly after, he ended up meeting Dr. Bruce Grayson, who happens to be one of the scientists who have studied this phenomenon for decades. And they started, along with Dr. Ken Ring and someone else, the International Association for Near-Death Experience. So I'm going to, for those of you who may be not present but will listen to this video, I'm going to say what a near-death experience is. A near-death experience is a phenomenon that occurs to human beings at the moment of death. However, a near-death experience could occur in many, many situations. It's not just when people flatline or they go through a surgery or they have an accident. It could occur, the same exact phenomenon could occur in many situations. You could be at the brink of having a very scary experience, like an accident, and nothing happened, and you still have a near-death experience. You could have what is called a shared death experience, which is not precisely a near-death experience, but is when someone is at the bedside, or not necessarily at the bedside of a loved one or someone that you know, and you go with them in the experience. You go with them, and you experience the beginning of them crossing over to the other side, which is what happened to me when my mom crossed over back in 2010. And the interesting thing is that I didn't have that experience by myself. Both my brother and my sister were present, and they had the same experience. And other people were in the room, but they didn't experience it, which was very interesting. So now going back to the reasons why people have these experiences. I know of someone who was in a concert playing classical music, and they all of a sudden had what is called a near-death experience. So it's not only when people are ready to cross over or when they have flatline. There are many ways in which you can experience that. Now, that being said, the after effects are the same, regardless of how you have the experience. That is, people have a shift like that, either within seconds or overnight, where their values, their beliefs, where so many things are completely changed about them overnight. And this is very difficult for a person who experiences that, even though they could have a very beautiful heavenly experience. It's very hard when you come back because you change so much. And then you come to a point that you need to integrate it. But before that, you need to be validated that you actually had this experience. So people go through tremendous changes when they have these experiences. And I'm explaining this, even though some of you are experiencers, and of course you are the choir, you know what this is like. But I'm talking about it for those who are going to be listening, or who are listening, who've never had a near-death experience and who would like to know more about it. So a near-death experience is a phenomenon that it could occur to anybody, regardless of their culture, regardless of their age, of their ethnicity. It doesn't matter what your background, you could have the same type of experience. In fact, some of the data talks about people who have studied near-death experiences, like Dr. Bruce Grayson. You could be somebody born and raised in China and somebody from this part of the world, and the experience is the same. Now, that being said, one of the things, there are many different things that happen to a person during the near-death experience, which I want to briefly talk about because it's important, is that you meet deceased loved ones sometimes. You encounter deceased loved ones when you have the experience. And sometimes you meet beings of light or religious figures like Jesus Christ. And even Buddha, depending on the belief of the person, they could encounter that being of light. But I've also seen people who are, for example, raised in the Jewish religion that meet Jesus. So you find all kinds of things. So one of the things that happened is you could meet deceased loved ones. At first, you could, so for some people, not everybody goes through all the steps, depending on your situation. Some people see themselves above their body, and they're able to view themselves and other people around it. And which is interesting, when they see their body, sometimes they don't recognize it. And if they do, they're kind of indifferent about it. because they figure that's not really them. It's kind of like the jacket that they wore to be here, like a vehicle to be in this life. And sometimes they're greeted by deceased loved ones, and they are present in the room. Or sometimes they see a point of light that becomes bigger, and then all of a sudden they see themselves emerge in this beautiful light that is full of unconditional love. And there you could also see other beings of light and even deceased loved ones. Also, a very interesting thing that happens is, which is life-changing, is a life review, where a person experiences in first-person perspective, but also in a third-person perspective, how their actions, how not only their actions, but their thoughts had an effect on the other person, but not only the other person, but you feel the ripple effect of what that person experiences. So occasionally, depending on their actions, they could come back with PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of being shocked by that experience, the life review. So again, they are experiencing not only their view, their entire life or parts of their life, but they sometimes get to experience what other people experience, again, as a result of their actions and thoughts. Even thoughts are very powerful. The other part that is an interesting phenomenon is the fact that people could not just go to the light, but they could see different dimensions. They could see a place, like some people describe it as a city of light, or a city of buildings with crystals, or just a beautiful place that is very similar to Earth, but much more beautiful, where everything is alive and flowers and plants emanate their own light. So everything is absolutely beautiful and perfect. Now, that being said, there is a small percentage of near-death experiences that are of negative nature. According to the data, we don't know if the percentage is that small, which is anywhere from 6 to 5%, or if it's that people report less these experiences for fear that people are going to put them down, or they're going to be, people are going to look at them in a negative way. But in any way, whether that experience is positive or negative, people's lives get completely changed for the most part. And we're going to be talking about a little bit later on about the 6 major challenges of the near-death experience. Basically, people experience some of them with these 6 challenges spiritually, what is called a spiritually transformative experience, where it takes a long time to not only accept these experiences, but to integrate it into this life so you can function and be happy and productive. Another thing that happens with the near-death experience is that you come back with the idea that you have a purpose. You have a purpose, and for most near-death experiencers that I have talked to in my private practice, the biggest thing is the message of love. The message of love, that the most important thing that we could all do without exception is spread love. It doesn't have to be in big ways, in little ways, like smiling to somebody that you see in the supermarket, any little gesture of kindness is an expression of love. I want to now start talking about, for the sake of time, I'm going to start talking about my own personal experience with the shared death experience when my mom crossed over back in 2010. We were all in ICU in the hospital. We were outright, absolutely devastated. My mom was absolutely my best friend ever. And it was the same experience for both of my siblings. So we were not leaving the ICU. We're staying there for days. People would bring us food. We would use the bathroom, but we just stayed there with her because we just wanted to make sure she didn't cross over without us being there. So we were, needless to say, completely devastated. And all of a sudden, like that, we went from being completely outright devastated and lack of sleep, and I mean, just the extreme. And all of a sudden, the three of us, experienced peace, absolute peace. We experienced joy. Imagine, we experienced joy and peace, and the room in the hospital just was lit up with light. It was completely lit up with light. And right before my mom, she started talking, she said she kept on seeing my grandmother. Obviously, my grandmother was waiting there to greet her. But part of that experience was my grandmother greeting her. So it was truly a gift, because we knew she was going to an amazing place. It was an amazing place full of pure peace and joy, and greeted by my grandmother. So it was just an amazing experience for us, which was very good that we were able to confirm, because as soon as it happened, we were looking at each other like, did that happen to you? And we confirm it. And that height that we felt, for lack of a better word, that height that we felt, we experienced that for days, which was interesting. We brought some of that from the shared death experience with us that lasted for days, where we were experiencing peace and joy. What a gift. So probably the people at the funeral were thinking, what's going on with this? So that was the experience, seeing my mom going to the light. But you guys could ask more question about it. But I'm going to talk about the near-death experience after effects, because yes, people come back from that experience change overnight or immediately, and they view the world differently. And you will hear about it, some of them. You will hear about it in one of the videos. And not only that, but what do they do with that experience? Who do they share that experience with? I mean, are they going to be believed? Are they going to think, oh my God, this person is crazy? And that happens even today, 2024, that people are really afraid of sharing their experience for fear that they're not going to be believed. So the integration process takes many years. And of course, there are different ways of doing it. But some of the after effects is that people become much, much more empathic. Again, the after effects that I'm going to be talking about are not necessarily happen to everybody. Some of them to some, and there are many, many after effects that So going back to this one, that people could become so empathic that you're walking by a funeral and you just feel overwhelmed with sadness, or you walk by a person who's homeless and you feel this sadness and sorrow. So that's a tough one, because you feel other people's emotion. And going back to that is because one thing that happens to near-death experiencers is that they come back knowing that we are all interconnected. We're all interconnected. It's like we're like fingers in one hand. We are all one. So that's one of the big after effects, the feeling of interconnectedness and that knowledge. Another after effect that is very common is that you become, and you'll hear it in the video, that you become very sensitive to different things, not only to people's emotions, but to energies. Like you could walk into a house for the first time and it may be a beautiful house, but you just don't feel comfortable there. There's the energy is uncomfortable. That's something that happens a lot to me. I remember going to these mansions that are very famous in Rhode Island, in Port, I can't remember that, you know, these absolutely gorgeous mansions. And I got in one of them and I just could not get away fast enough. I had to leave. It was a lot of people in line. I just had to leave. So again, so people become very sensitive to energies. Another thing that happens is, and that one is not a big deal, is that people, they can't wear a watch anymore because watches don't work. I mean, they could wear a new one every day and stops working. And in terms, going back, I'm sorry, I apologize. Going back to the sensitivities, you become sensitive to chemical products, like even things that people normally use to clean the bathroom. You just can't take it. You become very sensitive to that. You just become sensitive to everything, many things, depending on the person. That's a tough one. Also, you become sensitive to, sometimes you become clairvoyant. You come back knowing what other person is thinking, and not only what they are thinking, but what's going on in their lives. I had somebody come to me, an experiencer. She could, I mean, for her it was intense. She had a boyfriend she was living with, and he said to her, you know, honey, I'm gonna go out with the guys for a drink. And she said, no problem, I stay home, right? And then after he was out, all of a sudden, in her mind's eye, she started seeing him and what he was doing. He started seeing the person, the woman he was with, the color of the sheets, everything, like she was there. And then she wrote a letter to him and put it at the door so he could see it when he walked in. And instead of him being like remorse, he just said, you're a witch, and he left. So anyway, so that's something that happens to people. They could, I mean, that's an extreme, but that could happen. People could see the future. They could see what's going to happen to somebody. Their intuition goes to the roof. They sense what somebody is experiencing across the world. You're here in the United States and in Europe, a loved one is there and they know what's going to happen. Another after effect is that they could become so loving, and you could get in trouble because you just you experience love for everyone, and you end up like getting in trouble because like a young girl, like hugging guys, you know, that could be taken the wrong way. And I've known young women who've gone through that. So that's another after effect that you would say, well, that's very beautiful that you're experiencing love for everybody, but it could get you in trouble. Another after effect for some people is that they could come back feeling like ecstasy for a long time, like they are on cloud nine for a long time. And as a matter of fact, in one of the videos, they talk about it that we're going to talk about. So let me look at the time because I want to make sure we have enough time. Yeah. So there are many, many, many after effects that a person experiences. Oh, one thing is that most experiencers, they don't have fear of dying anymore. For one thing, they know that there is no such a thing as death. And not only that, but they know that what is coming is very, very good. So for the most part, I have seen that near-death experiences, and it's in the data, that people experience more joy in this life because they are more willing to take risk. I mean, it doesn't mean that they're going to do something that they know could kill them, but they definitely take more chances and they enjoy life. Many of them, especially the ones that have child near-death experiences, they become much more intelligent. They have a lot of, like the cognitive abilities are much more superior for some reason. We don't know. And also they could be, their attitude is more like childlike, more like joyful, not like also serious. They tend to be, some of them, more joyful naturally. That's another after effect, which is good. That one nobody complains about. Some people come back seeing auras or energy field around people. And well, that's a little bit of becoming clairvoyant and feeling people's emotions. I've had people coming to me, and which is tough sometimes, and tell me what I'm thinking and feeling. Some of the experiencers who have this after effect of being able to just pick up on what you're thinking and feeling. That's pretty something. And people would say that, oh, that's a good thing. No, they don't want to, because if you go to a supermarket and you are surrounded by a lot of people, so you get bombarded by all these feelings and thoughts from many people, that's not fun. You know, that's definitely not fun. So I'm going to start talking about the 6 major challenges of the near-death experience, because those are very important. These are people who basically experience spiritually transformative experiences. So we're going to start with the first one, which is the challenge of the heightened sensitivities. And we're going to have a video that we're going to show you right now, and then I'll talk about it in more detail.
Soon after, right after my near-death, and for an extended period of time, for probably 9 months, I really couldn't even go in the market. I couldn't go to any, dinner out, restaurants, or any types of entertainment. The sights and the sounds, and I felt like my skin was crawling, or that every part of me there was a loud reverberation. So it was really very uncomfortable for me just to be around noises or people, energies, I guess you could say. And not knowing what really happened to me, all I knew was I was shutting down more and more, and found myself becoming more of a hermit, more living in my little safe environment where I could somehow relax or escape from what I thought was happening around me.
Yeah, that was a scary road to feeling energy suddenly, and feeling like you had mentioned electricity, being sensitive to electricity. And that was definitely like I couldn't wear watches anymore. And it's just a sensitivity to a lot of things and people's emotions, especially if someone was in a lot of pain or suffering. It's like I could almost take that on. So to be really careful about being in groups and who I was with, and that's also steered my friendship circles. Like I had to be very selective of who I chose as friends, and it was just easier to be more in my own space. Psychic abilities definitely started to open up, and they're continuing to open up and becoming more acute to the point of sensing other people, even if they're across the planet, and knowing if they're in pain or in trouble. It's been hard to work with that, control it, or monitor it, because sometimes I can feel too much about what other people are feeling, and it throws me off. Like I'll be at work doing a presentation and then feel somebody in that moment and be shuddered and have to stop and take a break and go to the bathroom and come back, and that happens a lot.
My dad had a massive heart attack, and I went to see him in the hospital, and he was on these machines that were keeping him alive, and I knew that energy was in the room. I could feel it waiting for trying to take him, and the humans that were there that were trying to save his life was stopping the process. And I told the doctor, we've got to unhook him. We've got to let him go. And for 3 hours, I wouldn't leave right there. And all I kept saying over and over again is, you're stopping the process from happening. You must unhook these machines, and you must let him go. Finally, they agreed, and I unhooked him, and that energy was in the room, and it was present. And I got to tell my mom and the people that were in the room, oh, it's okay, it's so joyous and free. And as his body stopped working and his soul left, the energy was powerful in the room, and they could feel it. And I think that's what the whole deal was about.
And so my challenge is an ongoing effort to separate the essence of what I know myself to be and what everything else is. Identifying that I'm connected, but also identifying the separation or the uniqueness.
As you can see, these particular challenges, it could be tough. It could be very, very tough. I know an experiencer who actually couldn't leave her house even to get the mail. It was just too much. That's an extreme thing. So people become very, very sensitive. That's something that happens to me, but to a lower degree. Not to the point that that I feel everybody's emotion, but when one-on-one, that happens to me oftentimes. So this challenge is a tough one to describe to somebody, a lay person who doesn't know of this phenomenon and the after effects, because they're going to look at you like you have 4 heads. They won't understand. And that's one of the biggest challenges, because I've seen too many people who go to a therapist or a psychiatrist for help with this, and in turn, they're given a diagnosis like crazy diagnosis, like PTSD or any other thing, or even I know of people who have been given the diagnosis of schizophrenia, and they have been put on medication for years unnecessarily. And the person themselves, even though they know that this experience was more real than me talking to you, they begin to question the validity of their experience when they end up talking or sharing their experience with somebody who doesn't believe them. So I want to go, for the sake of time, go to the second challenge, which is accepting the return.
The dying and going to the light and the energy was birth for me. It was freedom, and it was what I've always looked for. It filled everything in me, around me, with a feeling of purpose and a feeling of fulfillment. And when I got back in my body, everything that I didn't want was there.
I just wish I were on the other side. It's so hard being here, knowing all our power that we have over there, and we're so restricted here to help.
That definitely still comes up, the feeling of wanting to be there, you know, in that space of peace and bliss and stillness versus here. You know, that still pops up, you know, pretty off and on, just questioning, you know, is this really the best place for me? And it feels so different from my perception of life and what the meaning of life.
The death for me was almost occurred when I came back in the body, in the sense of the feelings like, this is death, this is hell, man, being here. I feel a sense of loss in that regard, and not belonging. I have an intensified feeling of not belonging.
At first, I didn't know about I didn't put the pieces together. And then when I did put the pieces together, I was furious that I was sent back to my body. I was furious. I mean, I loved going home. I needed to go home. I'm still very confused. I mean, that's probably I'm confused. And I don't think that I've come back totally, or I will ever come back totally, because I don't know if I want to.
I wanted to come back. So that was something that was my last thought as I was moving beyond this life and completely staying in that next one. I wanted to come back for my children. So I am completely in that moment that I am here for them.
I was just completely frustrated at finding my purpose. I spent 10 years looking and trying to find why I survived that accident and not finding it. And at that point, I wanted to go back. And for the first time in 10 years, seriously thought about checking out again, and even committing suicide again, because there was such a frustration and sadness and anger with maybe I wasn't supposed to have maybe I don't have a purpose. Maybe it is a form of punishment to be here still.
I wasn't so depressed that I would have taken my life, but the thought had crossed my mind that anything to get on the other side again.
That was in the back of my mind several times, but yet the teachings of the light seemed to indicate that wouldn't be a good idea, it wouldn't be a good choice. And it's really not in our hands to do something like that. It seemed like it would frustrate our experience, that it would postpone what you're trying to achieve for who knows how long.
Well, as you can see, accepting the return is a big challenge, to the point that oftentimes I have seen people come back feeling depressed because they don't want to be here. They just resist being here. And even mothers with children, they are told on the other side, it's not your time, you have to go back, you have children. They say, oh no, they'll be fine, and they want to stay, but they are sent back anyway. So accepting the return is one of the toughest one. Is a lifelong integration process for some, unless they do something about it, get the support to change that, so that they could integrate it and live their purpose and live a happy life. And the reason, obviously, like you saw, it's so hard to accept the return is because the shift is so dramatic. They all describe it in a different way. And they don't commit suicide because they know they're not supposed to, because that would hinder the reason that they are here, that they have a purpose. And one of the things that happens is they want to hurry up and find out what that purpose is, that they could just come back as soon as possible. But it doesn't really work that way. It's interesting, those experiences, they feel like it just happened, even though the experience happened 20 years, 30 years, 40 years ago. When you think about it, when you remember it, it feels like it's happening, like it's very present and you don't forget it. That's what I have seen, and that what is in the data, that this experience not only is amazing, but it's more real than real, and it stays like that in your mind for decades, which is amazing. Another thing that is difficult for accepting the return is for people who don't have, when they come back, they don't have people that are uplifting, that they don't have a good situation in this life. That makes it even harder. That makes it really, really tough. And they deal with it, again, because they are told in some occasions, not always, that is not their time, that they have to go back because they have a purpose. So, so that's not an easy one. And for the ones who become depressed, you know, sometimes they're giving antidepressants, but they really don't work. Really, the antidepressants really don't work, because it's mostly they are grieving. But the experience is grieving, not being home. This is not home. This is like a foreign place for them. So they're grieving being home. So as far as accepting the return, that's one of the toughest integrations that I have seen personally in my practice, and what is being described in the data by scientists. So we're going to go to the next challenge, which is finding purpose. We're going to watch that video.
I think my purpose, I have a purpose here, not quite sure the direction of it. I'm almost positive it has to do with energy and healing of people. How that will manifest, I don't know. I just wish the universe would just lay it out there for me and throw me on the road and let me at it. Because I frustrate, and I question if I'm doing the right thing at the right time. And I don't have a source to really go to. That's the other frustrating part, is people who have had this experience, they don't know where to go from here. They don't know what to do. Or some may remember, but most people that I've talked to do not know what they're meant to do.
Yeah, there's a very intense sense of urgency to fulfill my purpose and put it into action and live it. And it seems to grow monthly. The urgency is really quite intense. And the frustration is, it feels, my purpose that I'm carrying feels so big that it's overwhelming, and I get afraid of it, and that it's too much for me to carry, and how can I ever accomplish this purpose? And that's been the shift right now, is not knowing that I don't have to do it alone, that, you know, it can be shared, and maybe there'll be other people that might connect with it and want to be a part of it. And
there was this purpose for me to do here, and I just didn't understand it. And I really knew in my heart that I couldn't measure up to being that person or fulfilling that thing. And so I found drugs and alcohol as a solution to blocking off those feelings. and I knew I couldn't find it no matter how hard I looked for it. And so it was easier to escape than it was to do. And my relationships with people became empty because I knew I was this, and I couldn't do it, so I just didn't try anymore.
Thank you. As you can see, that's also a difficult challenge, because even though they are told you have a purpose, you have to do it, they are not necessarily told what the purpose is. And that's something that, of course, is part of the integration process, and it could take many years to figure that out. And that being said, you know, many people change careers when they come back, even though they don't know their purpose. I had an experiencer when I lived in Connecticut, coming from Boston, because right after he had his near-death experience, he was a big CEO working for an advertising agency. And as soon as he came back, he went to work and said, this is not my purpose. This is not what I'm here to do. And he just quit his job. Not only quit his job, but he just gave away all his possessions. Needless to say, that caused quite the issue with his wife. So, you know, like you heard, you know, relationships get compromised, not only because you feel different, but because of your changes in values. So this person was looking for his purpose, the one that I just told you about, and he just couldn't figure it out. All he knew is that making commercials on TV wasn't one. So this is something that happens to a lot of people. If somebody was in the military or working for the police, they quit. They could never shoot another person. They could never use a gun. So anyway, so because they know they have a purpose, and of course their purpose is not to do those kind of jobs. So that takes a long time. But at the end, for those who have been able to achieve that and integrate that aspect of the near-death experience, they know that at the end is all about love. It's all about love, whatever that is, whether it is helping this one, or oftentimes near-death experiencers come back and they change profession to one of help, like becoming a social worker, a counselor. Anyway, so in order to figure that's maybe my purpose. So finding a way of finding a purpose is, for some, like urgent, is an emergency, because that way, once they fulfill that purpose, they could just go. They could go home, done, end of story. As you heard of one of the experiencers, he just couldn't deal with it, and he just decided to self-medicate with alcohol. And he just began to drink, which happens. It really happens to some people, until they get that intuitive nudge and they go, wait a minute, I gotta stop this, and I have to work on my purpose. So all the challenges are difficult, but figuring the purpose again is just a matter of time, and figuring out and talking to people and getting a support system. And one of the things that I have found, well, I'm jumping, but one of the things that I have found that helps experiencers is to meditate. Meditate, because your intuition, you know, gets bigger, and then you get these ideas, not only for your purpose, but for what you're supposed to be changing or achieving in this life. So now we're gonna go to the next challenge, which is integrating your values in this life.
I can't think of any part of my life that it didn't affect, because the whole 38 years of my life came after the NDE.
After this experience, my marriage failed, and that was a very traumatic experience, and having to let that go, that was painful. That was the most painful thing I went through.
Going to college later was like a tremendous shutting down. And I even changed my major. I was studying political science, and it was just, there was just too much that didn't ring right. So I switched to psychology because it seemed to be more open, but it was behaviorism, and it was just putting people in a box. And I came to psychology because, you know, I was looking for a way to help people. But the educational process was so antithetical to what I knew to be true.
Working a job, a traditional job, as they say, is very difficult for me. I hate going to work. I know I have to earn a living, keep a roof over my head, but it's not where my heart belongs. So much of the games that are played in the corporate world, I just can't stand it. I never could. I don't feel like I belong because I don't play in the clique area. The not fitting in, the not belonging, because it's so difficult being here, knowing what's on the other side.
I was racing race cars just before that happened, and I wanted to be a professional race car driver. And after this happened, I didn't want to be a professional race car driver anymore. I didn't want to you know, I had absolutely no interest in physical objects anymore. Like being money and cars and all those things that I used to think were so wonderful, and this fame and fortune was so nothing compared to what I had seen. And so it really made me just go phooey on the human, you know, the so-called human goals are what we're, you know, the perfect family life, or, you know, being this successful person. I had no desire to be a successful person.
And then it becomes like, well, how can I have a real job? Or how do I maintain the everyday realities of being in a body and having a job or a business or something? It completely throws me off kilter. So I'm continually challenged with the economic reality of, okay, now I'm a freak, now this happened to me, now what? Nobody recognizes, they just say, well, go get a job. It's just not that easy. You just can't. It's like you're dysfunctional or disabled in many ways, and super abled in others.
I had a really hard time with religion after that. I had a really hard time with religion because there's no finger pointing in that. There's no, you did bad things and you're going to be held accountable for them. And so all I knew is that when I was in that energy, it was complete love and it was complete acceptance, and there was nothing bad that ever happened. And so when I come back, my beliefs of this religion or this God, and my grandma was this very, she was like a hellfire and damnation type thing, you know, if you do something bad, you're going to pay for it with God. And so my whole belief towards religion at that point is just smashed.
And after the experience, I felt, look, I don't need that anymore. You know, you get a confirmation in your experience that God loves you, no matter what you do, even if you don't fulfill A, B, C, D, and E. I mean, it's it's not that demanding.
So many people don't want to hear about it, and it's so important. For some reason, we don't want to deal with death. And I think it's so light that I joke about it, and people don't even understand that.
I've had issues with people who say, you know, how can you rejoice in death? It's a sad thing. And what I've been given as a gift is to explain what death is. And one of the reasons why I died is so that I could understand that. And maybe I could put into words, or maybe I could put into my actions what that's about.
Well, as you can see, this is another one that is a bit difficult, because, you know, your values change. People stop caring about being famous or wealthy or having status. That's really irrelevant. You know, it doesn't have any meaning. It doesn't mean that you reject it, but it's not a priority in your life anymore. And also the idea of, you know, religion, people, for the most part, people stop being religious. They stop being religious and they just become more spiritual, because for many of the religions, there is this thing about you do good or else. It's punitive in some ways. Like, you know, if you commit these sins, like in the Catholic Church, if you don't commit these sins and you don't confess, you're going to go to hell. And so they stop being religious, because obviously it's not accurate at all, because they learn that God's love is unconditional. Imagine a loving God sending his children to hell for good. That doesn't make any sense. So anyway, so integrating their values is a big thing. And again, like I mentioned before, changing careers happens often, and they get frustrated when they have to go back to a job that they have to do because they have to make a living, and they don't find a purpose, or they don't feel good about it. For example, a job where, as a probation officer, where you're being punitive and you're making people scared, forget it. That's torture for somebody who has this experience. So it's a tough one, even though they know that what is expected of the other side, God, which is all encompassing, is just very simple. You know, it's just very, very simple. You're loved no matter what. You want to be loving, you want to be kind. So, you know, that's one that takes a long time to integrate. And, you know, by the way, the divorce rate for near-death experiencers is very high. According to the data, is about 75% of near-death experiencers end up getting a divorce, because not only that they have changed completely. I mean, think about it. Their spouse finds themselves married to somebody who is completely changed. So that causes problems and friction in the relationship. So many end up getting divorced by their spouse, which is a hard one, because not only they came back to this, but they're going to lose their spouse. So that's one thing that I've seen a lot in my practice. And for the people who have that, I bring their families in the session, like their spouse and their families, so that they could understand, and in turn help their spouse or significant other, help them integrate that into their lives, as opposed to push them away. Oh, you're not the same one, so that's it for me. For the children, is tough too. For the ones who they end up loving everybody, they act like they love their kids' neighbors as much as they love their own children. The children are like, what's up with that? They don't appreciate that. They want to be loved, especially, you know, by their mom or dad. So that's something that it takes a while to integrate. It takes a long time. And needless to say, it's much easier if you have a support system, like going to a group like this one and other groups that are there with IANDS, support groups, or going to a therapist, somebody who knows these experiences. And by the way, if you're the person, somebody here is listening because they're having marital problems as a result of your near-death experience, do not go to a counselor who's not knowledgeable of this phenomenon, because it's going to make it worse. If it's somebody who's not knowledgeable, don't walk out, run, because I've seen a lot of damage be done. So now, if we could go to the next challenge, which is the radical shift in reality.
The feelings when I first came back, it was utterly ecstasy and bliss for, I would say, a good 2 months. It was like you felt like you were walking on cloud 9, and you weren't taking anything to put you on cloud 9. There were no drugs, there was no alcohol, there was just normal life, but you remembered the light and the energy, and it was just, you looked at life differently, you looked at people differently, you looked at situations differently. It was like you could see through life, like everything was coordinated or worked in a harmonious whole.
It caused me within 24 to 48 hours to rethink everything I'd ever been taught or thought that I knew about life and mankind and creation. And, you know, I just completely rethought my whole world. The experience was the most real thing that ever happened in my life. It was the real place where we know the truth. And this is a dream state. This is the illusion.
I felt very depressed and unsure of everything around me. I mean, reality wasn't real. Nothing appeared the same. And for about 48 hours after my near experience, I saw people walking as paper dolls.
This world was really, it felt almost animated at times. It felt like I was walking through, going through the motions, but not living the emotions, because my whole purpose was to get back to where I had been. And so I really felt like an actor. I felt like every day that I participated in life was a false thing. I couldn't really be who I was, and I didn't know who I was. I lost all direction of what I was supposed to be doing.
What happened immediately is that I had a spiritual breakdown, or a nervous breakdown. I couldn't process the two realities. I couldn't do anything. I was totally having a nervous breakdown. People gave me antidepressants, and they gave me this kind of pills and that kind of pills, and nothing worked. I just sank, and I couldn't get out of bed.
As you can see, this is one of the toughest ones, because like one of them said, this here feels like a dream. This feels like a dream compared to how it feels on the other side. It feels more real than real. And to the point that they felt, one of them mentioned that it was like, everything was like paper dolls, like not real. And it must be, it is scary to come from a place that feels like absolute home, that feels more real than real, and come back to this place where you can't relate to anything or anybody, and it doesn't feel real. That's a very, very difficult one. And as I mentioned before, people end up very depressed, and they're pathologized. They're just given, they're saying, oh, you're just having this diagnosis or that diagnosis, or you're just depressed, just take antidepressants, which doesn't help at all, needless to say. So this one takes a long, long time, because some people, it's like they have one foot here and the other foot on the other side. So they don't feel completely grounded here. Literally, I often have heard that some people feel like one foot here and the other one here. That's hard to integrate when you don't feel grounded. So one of the things that is very helpful is when somebody feels like that is to do things that make you feel grounded. Walk in nature. If you can't do it barefooted, hug a tree. It's a really difficult one. And some of the people, they just want to just stay away. They don't go out. They just stay. They kind of isolate themselves for a while. I've seen that. They isolate because it's just too uncomfortable out there. Not only because of the sensitivities, but because it just doesn't feel right. It's almost like being put in another planet that feels like think about this. Let's suppose that this for us is very, very real. But when we dream, it just doesn't feel clear. So for them, it feels like a dream. Imagine that. So this radical shift in reality, I mean, for some maybe good. Like the guy, he came back feeling like ecstasy, and like he brought that joy to his life, but eventually that fades away. Kind of like what my brothers and my sister and my brother and I experienced with the shared death experience, where we felt the high, that joy for a while. It lasted for a few days. For some, it could last for months, that ecstasy, but then when it comes down, it doesn't feel good to be here, because it feels like a dream state that there is a lot of negativity and suffering and dichotomy. That being said, we're supposed to enjoy it, and but it's hard to enjoy when you don't feel like you fit in at all. It really makes it hard. So for the sake of time, we're going to the next challenge, which is a tough one, sharing the experience.
No.
It was the same thing. It was like, I had to tell the world, and this is a woman who is now very close to me since my mother had already passed. This was my mother-in-law, and I thought, this was a very important part of my life that she should know about. And, I just got this rejection, and it just tore me apart.
I started to try to explain to my family, just because that's all I could think about. Every waking moment was just about thinking about that and about getting back to it. So I started to express it, and people actually feared it, and I felt clumsy, because I knew how wonderful it was. I knew how amazing it was, and no matter how hard I tried to verbalize what I had seen or what I had saw, I couldn't put into words.
Surprised me, and in fact, the day that I had the experience and I came back home, I called 5 of my girlfriends and told them about the experience. 4 of them turned right around and started telling me about experiences that they had, which totally surprised me because they'd never ever mentioned it. And then one of the 5 put a note on my door that said, "Please don't call me or talk to me anymore, because I think you are in need of psychiatric help."
For me, it wasn't so much that people weren't open to hearing it. It was just truly that for those closest to me, life went on for them. They could separate that experience from what happened in day-to-day life. And yet, to me, it was all part of everything that I had become and was going to be from that point forward. It wasn't a separate experience. So for me, it changed the way I dealt with others.
On the other hand, if they know I've had a near-death experience, they will often ask. And what frustrates me is they want to know the situation, not about the lessons, not about what I take with it, not about the journey, not about what's reality or what it is, just what happened to you. I mean, if I talk about the spirit side or going beyond and the messages, it seems like that's insignificant to others. They just want to know, well, how did it happen? Like, was there a lot of blood, or was, you know?
I felt a difference between me and my friends, and everybody wanted to talk to me about the physical part of the accident. You know, how bad did it hurt? What happened? And really, all I wanted to talk about was the experience that I had with the death, and people thought I was crazy. They walked away from me. As you know, I went to the classroom to talk about it, and some people acknowledged it, and some people were like, what a freak, what a weirdo, I can't deal with him. And
they just are fascinated with that part. I just want to shut down, really. That's kind of, I guess, what makes me not want to talk. It's like, oh, I don't want to do this again, because they're just going to want to know the story.
You're definitely in a minority, because if I went out every day and said to everybody that I met, I talked to God, they would think I was nuts, and it's sad that you can't talk freely about the experience. So I feel pinned in, like I have all of this exuberance and all of these lessons to give, but you also have to have a receiver.
And he said, you must go and tell your story. And I said, no one wants to hear my story. And he said, they will want to hear your story. And as I was telling it, it was the first time that people understood what I was saying, because they were nodding in acceptance. Yeah, we know what you're talking about. And I thought, wow, someone really wants to hear this, and they know what I'm saying. And I was having trouble finding words to express what happened to me. In the telling of the story, I got real emotional because I had buried it for so long that one of the experiencers sitting to my right held me, and they just allowed me to cry for about 15 to 20 minutes. And I didn't realize the impact of holding it in so long, what it really did to me.
Well, as you can see, that challenge of sharing the experience is a really, really, really tough one. I know people who have kept it in, have not shared it for 30 years. Imagine sharing this experience for 30 years. That's a long time. And it doesn't feel good not being able to share it for fear. And another thing that, as you see, is that sharing the experience is not an easy task, even for someone who is willing to listen in an open, non-judgmental way, because there are no words to describe it. Oftentimes, experiences said that there is no English or any language way to describe these experiences. So that right there makes it challenging. And sometimes until they go to a group where they hear other people, they begin to put words to their experience. Like, because before that, they just don't have a way to express it. But again, it's so sad and it's heartbreaking when they finally share the experience, especially when it's a loved one and that person doesn't believe them. I've seen families that push their experiencer away for fear that, which is interesting, they're describing a beautiful experience, but they have fear to hear about it. I know of people who have, obviously, like I mentioned before, share it with a therapist who absolutely thinks that that's they're having just pathology, and that's just devastated. And when that happens, they just shut down. They stop talking. They stop talking about it, because what's the point? You know, what's the point of talking about it if they're going to be not believe and pathologize, you know? And another thing that is hard, even for the people who listen, let's say your spouse listens to you or your family, but for them, you know, you told me the story, life goes on, they just move on. But for you, that experience stays with you for life. And then you need time to, you need years, you need time to integrate it. So you need to be able to integrate it in a way that you're sharing. As you're integrating it, you are sharing how the steps, how you're doing that. That's a very, very, very difficult one. The sharing of the experience is one of the toughest, because here you have the most beautiful experience that you can't even put words to express it. And you finally do express it, and you're not necessarily believed, or you're just dismissed or ridiculed. That's tough. I mean, occasionally the person is lucky to share it with somebody who initially believes them and is interested in their experience. Like a nurse, oftentimes nurses in a hospital, let's say if the person had the near-death experience at a hospital, they opened their eyes and they said, "What happened? Oh, honey, you know, you almost died. We almost lost you." Said, "No, why am I here? I don't want to be here." And then they talk about their experience, and the nurses hear about it, so they're more open, oftentimes, because they hear it from their patients, depending on what part of the hospital they work. So it's a tough one that I have seen, really tough. That's why these groups are just amazing. What a ways. And also to share the experience, like Angie, you know, you're sharing the experience with other people. That's huge. You know, the more people hear about it, the better, because it happens to millions of people throughout the world, but yet it's still taboo for a lot of people, which is unbelievable, even nowadays, where, I mean, you see it in movies, you know, there are movies being made about it, but still, for some reason, there are scientists that are trying to prove that these experiences happen for lack of oxygen, because of the medication. They're trying to explain it away with things that make no sense, because there are people who have had these experiences when their brain is totally not functioning at all. Like Evan Alexander, I understand he had an experience, you guys have probably heard about it. His brain did not have the ability to produce one thought or one image, and yet he had a very, very profound near-death experience. And fortunately, you know, he was lucky that his family accepted it and believed it. And there, you know, some scientists are still trying to figure this out. But thanks to Dr. Bruce Grayson, that has been studying this for decades, this is coming more on the mainstream. So I don't know if you guys want to start questions and answers.
Yeah, I'd like to invite people to bring their questions. Those of you who are joining us online who maybe came in late, if you want to protect your privacy, please just feel free to ask your questions through the chat, and I will ask them for Deanna. If you don't mind being on camera, because this will go on our YouTube channel eventually, you can raise your hand and ask questions online. Those of you here, feel free to write a question in the pad and just pass it to me, or just come to the mic and ask the question directly. So I have a quick question for you, Deanna. Your shared death experience, you mentioned that it was interesting. There was several people present at the death of your mom, including your siblings other people. But it was the three of you, I think your sister, your brother, and yourself, who had the shared death experience. And it was very similar, which is really interesting. Shared death experiences are interesting in and of themselves, but even more interesting when you have several people having the same one at the same time. It just adds so much more credence to it. You mentioned joy and peace and going from feeling rather devastated at the loss of your mom to the complete opposite series of emotions. Did you actually see anything? I've heard of situations where in the shared death experience, the experiencer goes a certain way in their mind's eye. They almost see the person who's dying kind of transitioning over to the other side, and they will go on that spiritual journey with them to a certain point. And then there's the point of no return. The person goes on, they know that they can't step over, and then they come back. Did you experience any of that? Did you see anything?
Well, like I mentioned before, ours didn't go that far. That we went to a place of no return, which happens to some, which is unbelievable. This is great. But you were asking me something about the people who were present who didn't experience it.
Well, that too, yes.
Okay.
You know, they were presumably present in that hospital room, just going through the grief of losing your mother, losing that relative. But I'm just curious about the experience, just to sort of enlighten us a little bit on what a shared death experience is.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Basically, what in terms of what we experienced was like this tremendous joy after experiencing the other extreme, and this absolute peace, and seeing the room like illuminate. It was all light. It was all light, and my grandmother waiting for her. So that was it. And,
did you see your grandmother there, or was it your mother saying that her mother was there that led you to believe that the grandmother was present, or did you see any of that yourself?
My mom said it to us.
Ah, okay. So it was through your mother. Okay.
Which we didn't see her, but she shared with us that she was there. She was, and but that she said that right before.
Okay.
Right before she passed.
Which resonates with what people say about, the death experience, as it were, relatives coming to welcome them and to help them transition over, to help them make that change.
And in my mom's case, she kept saying that she was, by the time she passed away, she crossed over was 3 weeks, the time she spent in the hospital. But she was telling me, even before going to the hospital, she was okay, she's healthy. She says, Mom, every time I wake up, I see your grandmother. So she started seeing her before, and I just wish back then I had the knowledge that I have now. Because then I would have known, something is happening. Yeah. And then, of course, she saw her like right there. Right before.
So saying now, looking back, given all your experience and your knowledge of the near-death experience or the death experience, your mother telling you that her mother was there would be a key to, she'll be transitioning soon because she's already seeing people from the other side coming to her.
Absolutely. So, yes.
Perhaps a little readier if you could be readier.
Yeah, it's important for people to be aware of that, you know.
Yeah, to know that it's going to happen. Yeah. And then you said it stayed with you, those feelings of peace and joy stayed with you for
days.
Interesting. Okay. You also talked about your sensitivity to going to Newport, Rhode Island, and going into one of the mansions and just the vibes that you were picking up. Was this as a result of your shared death experience, or have you always been very empathetic and sensitive to energy?
No, this was as a result of it.
Ah, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you can come back with sensitivities from a shared death experience.
Yeah.
It wasn't even your death, it was somebody else's. And also if you have a near-death experience where you actually physically die.
And it's tough. Sometimes that one, in a way that you become more, I became much, much more empathic. Like, that's a tough one, because where I live, well, I don't, near Cleveland, there's, you see a lot of homeless. Not where I live, but like half an hour where I have to go for work. And it's tough because you feel what, I mean, I don't like it. It's tough because you're feeling what they're feeling, and then you feel compelled to do something about it. Mm-hmm. And you do, because you want to make it better, you know?
We have a question from one of our audience members, Mary, and she's asking about, do you hear from clients whether they're able to find a way back to revisit that experience through perhaps, so that they can minimize their homesickness? Is there anything that you can do with them to just help them just feel a little less depressed, alien, as it were?
So the question is, what can a person do to get a taste of in other words, not going back, but do something to have a taste of what it's like being back home again?
Right. And she also offers, do you help with an out-of-body experience or any kind of meditation? Do you help them? Do you encourage people to have those experiences to try to just feel a little better and closer to home, as it were?
Well, one thing that I found to be very, very helpful and across the board is meditating. Because, okay, going back to meditation, there are many different kinds of meditation. There are two that I suggest. One is just basically quieting your mind. You don't necessarily push your thoughts away, because when you resist, you attract. You don't want to do that. But basically, you focus on your breath. Your in-breath, you're inhaling and exhaling. And then in between that, you get to the gap between thoughts, where there are no thoughts, which happens spontaneously. And in that point, I mean, don't expect it the first or second, third time, but eventually somebody could experience a degree of that peace that you experienced during the near-death experience. Not only that, but like I mentioned before, it just sharpens your intuition as far as finding your purpose and different challenges that you have. But there's another meditation that I highly recommend for near-death experiencers, especially for those who come back feeling really challenged and depressed, is a meditation called Transcendental Meditation. And the reason I often suggest that, and is extremely effective, is a technique that has existed for thousands of years. And the knowledge has been kept pure for thousands of years. And it basically, what it does, in a simple way, you transcend. You go to the source of thought where there is no thought. And you get to experience at some point what is called transcendence. There are 3 states of consciousness we all experience: awake state of consciousness, sleep state of consciousness, and dreaming state of consciousness. When you do TM, eventually you get to experience transcendent state of consciousness. But the reason I ask people to do it is not just for that. That's just the bonus. The reason I ask people to do that is because it gets rid of, in a gradual way, deep-rooted stress and surface stress gradually. So what happens is that they start to feel gradually better. I know experiencers who have been like not only anxious, but not only depressed, but anxious, then they start to feel gradually better as far as that's concerned in a gradual way. It takes a few months, but I love it. And I've been doing personally, just self-disclosure, I've been doing this technique for many years. And as a result of doing it for so many years, I now experience what is called waves of cosmic consciousness all the time, which is, everybody wants to experience that, which is experiencing bliss all the time. But anyway, I highly recommend it, those two.
Very interesting. Thank you. So we have somebody with a raised hand here. Donna, it's going to take a moment to unmute you. So if you could get ready. And we have a couple of other questions coming too. Go ahead, Donna. I think you're unmuted now.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. This has been so great. I did have a near-death experience as an early teenager, and it was at the hands of an abuser. When I did come back to consciousness and back to this world, I was too young to be able to really in a position where I couldn't really verbalize it. And so what I did was I just went on with life. So what you were saying today, there were so many of those things, the anger that I was alive and having to come back to the same old, and having to do it on my own. I mean, there was just a lot of things, and not feeling like I fit in, and that ability, you know, all of the things that you said today, that heightened empathy and then the anxiousness that would come with it. So I can completely understand all of that. My question would be, is a book?
Hold on one second, guys. Just one moment. We seem to have some interference. Can you just hold on for a second, Donna?
Sure.
Okay, we're good now. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Yes. Is there a book that you could recommend for an adult who had a near-death experience as a child, but couldn't really deal with it at that point, that could maybe use, you know, some helpful hints now? Or is it just any kind of near-death experience books?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that. Me sharing this knowledge has been helpful, and that you could identify with a lot of that. And I'm sorry that it happened in that way. But going back to a particular book, I think one thing that helps, read childhood near-death experiences. There is a person who wrote this book. I can't remember the name, but her first name is Ingrid.
Yes, Dr. Ingrid Hunkala.
Yes.
Her talk to our group.
She has?
Yes. She had an experience when she was 3. She drowned. Is that the story?
That's the story.
Right. Yeah.
I would suggest you read that book and different books, because you'll find validation, because they talk not about just the experience, but what happens after.
Yes.
Yeah. That's definitely what you want.
If you'd like to get in touch with me afterwards, Donna, you can always email me or get in touch with me through our meetup group. I'd be happy to send you a link to that interview that we've had with Ingrid, which was wonderful. She's also all over YouTube. Another suggestion that was made by one of our members who's here in person, is DMH Atwater. PMH Atwater. She is a prolific writer. She's an older lady. She's been writing on the near-death experience for a very long time. That's actually her calling. She had a near-death experience and was told, come back, you need to write about it. And she's written on all sorts of demographics, children, adults. She's a sort of a wonderful font of knowledge. So you may want to look her up as well, PMH Atwater.
Okay, thank you both very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Angie, thank you for sharing about PMH Atwater, because she actually had 3 near-death experiences, and she actually wrote about near-death experiences of people who are in the womb, which is amazing. They remember it afterwards. But yeah, definitely. So yeah, definitely read about it. There is a book that is not out there yet, that I'm writing with 2 other authors, that is about 12-step integration of the near-death experience, but is on the works, because as far as I'm concerned, it has to be very polished and be just right. But that will be coming up sometime in the future.
Okay. So somebody else actually mentioned that PMH Atwater has written a book called Children's NDEs. So that's
there you go.
Second confirmation of that source. Also, Danny is asking, are you available to coach, help with therapy, Diana? And if so, on one-on-one sessions. And I do believe that we have Diana's contact information on our meetup group. Is that correct? Yeah, I'm getting confirmation that we do have that information, Danny. So if you'd like to contact Diana directly, you can certainly do that. Let me know if you have any issues with finding her information if you're not successful there. I just want to go back because we do have some questions here. We have Erica, who is actually training to become an end-of-life doula. And helping people, labor out of life, as it were. What lessons from NDEs could resonate and support people at the end of life? That's her question. She's also asking, what processing work would be powerful for people approaching end of life?
That's a good question, and it's a good one. This knowledge is beautiful for someone who's in the process of crossing over, especially if they may be afraid. It's good to know. I mean, oftentimes, that being said, you probably know from working with them, is that people have glimpses of the afterlife before they crossover. It could be minutes, days, but they have glimpses of the afterlife. So they're more prepared. But for those who don't, giving some, sharing some of the knowledge of this experience is very soothing. I have found it to be very soothing. Very, very soothing. And I'm going to give you an example, personal one. When my dad was in the process of crossing over, even though he saw my mom, he said, your mom is waiting for me, okay? For whatever reason, he was afraid. He said, I'm not ready to go. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Even though he would see her, he was afraid. And then he disclosed, I just, coming from the Catholic Church, like, I'm afraid of my sins. So at that point, we said, Dad, you have nothing to worry. You're perfect just the way you are. You're going to a place of absolute acceptance and unconditional love and joy and peace. Go for it. We give you permission. You'll love it. And we kept on repeating that, and he got it, and he finally let go.
I have a question regarding purpose, and a couple of people are curious about purpose. So a lot of the people that you featured on the videos were really desperate to find their life purpose. And that's really interesting. So I have a couple of questions. One is, how do you help that person find their life purpose? But another question that comes to mind is, a lot of what I've been reading recently is that we shouldn't be human. We should be human beings and not human doings. That really we need to just be, because we are very special in and of ourselves, but we are conditioned on this plane to always do something in order to become acceptable, to blend in, to be approved of. But on the other side, we're just amazing beings that come here to experience and to expand consciousness in our own unique ways. So finding a purpose, or feeling that you have to have a purpose, almost flies in the face of just being. So it's interesting, because some of those people, I wanted to reach out to them and say, just be, just try to share the experience. I know it's very difficult for many of them to share it because they don't get the receptive audience. But do we really have to have a purpose? Isn't just being here a purpose in just experiencing life? But if you could tackle how do you help people find their purpose when they're so confused and feel they have to have one first?
Yes, Angie, it's such a dichotomy, because yes, you hear across the board that we're supposed to enjoy this life. We're supposed to experience this life with all this dichotomy of good and bad. We're supposed to do that. That being said, finding the purpose, the urgency is obviously because they want to get back soon. And how to help them? Well, you know, we all have skills. And also going back to getting into your intuition, meditate, get intuitive nudges. Oh, you know, not only during your meditation, no, but out there, you get signs. You do get signs. Ask your guides too. We all have guides at all times. At all times, put them to work. Guide me, put things in front of me. I tell my clients that. And it happens gradually. And when you let go of the urgency and the strain, and you let go and just go with the flow, it comes more easily.
But would you also say that, I mean, we're all sprinkled with a constellation of different talents. You know, we've all got our shortcomings, but everybody has some talents or other. Do you not think that the answer lies in sort of following your bliss, which really is about following your talent, because what you end up being good at is going to be very fulfilling by default, right? Because you're good at it, therefore you're drawn, therefore it's going to be fulfilling most of the time, right? Depending on what it is that you're drawn to. Do you not think that, you know, listening to what is appealing, following the bliss aspect of things might be revealing of what the person's purpose is?
Absolutely. I mean, needless to say, when you are doing what you love, you're good at it. It doesn't feel like work because you love doing it, right?
Yeah. So
and some people, I'm sorry?
I think therein maybe lies the secret. You know, that's a clue. That's a big clue. What are you good at?
But some people, but you know, I think unbelievable, but some people just don't know, especially because they haven't had a taste of it. So people who just went to college, went through the motions, oh, I'm going to study economics. Okay, I'm supposed to do that and find a job at a company. You just go with the flow, but you just don't want it. So for them, for people like that, one of the experiencers talk about that, you know, working in the corporate world is like, you know, meaningless. It takes a little bit more time to figure it out. What is it that, and of course, needless to say, to find out what you're good at. And again, what you're good at is something that you always enjoy. You know, we enjoy what we are good at, you know, where our skills are. Yeah.
So Regina is asking, there seem to be two paths sought that are at odds with one another: meditating, which takes you away from this reality, and secondly, finding a sense of purpose in the world, which requires totally engaging in this world. So that engagement can be increased political action, for example. But how do you reconcile these two paths, the disengagement and yet the engagement at the same time?
Well, thank you for the question, and it's a good one. Again, it's another dichotomy. It doesn't mean you're going to find the purpose while you have your eyes closed and meditating, necessarily. No. It just means that you open your intuition. When you're busy doing this and that, your mind is very busy. As a matter of fact, as a therapist, I know that most of our thoughts stem from the subconscious mind, which is your past. So you're busy thinking this and that, so you don't have the space to get that intuitive nudge to say, oh, maybe this and that. Oh, yes, you definitely, doesn't mean you find it while you're meditating. But when you find yourself in a more peaceful, less busy place, it's easier to find it. Again, it doesn't have to be with your eyes closed while you're meditating.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Does that answer the question?
Does it answer the question? Sorry, Regina, does it answer the question? I got the wrong asker there. Well, hopefully we'll hear in a few minutes whether it was. I'm sure it did answer the question. So my question to you is, you know, There was a young man in the video who basically was so frustrated with not being able to find his purpose and wanted to go home that he was considering committing suicide, maybe even a second time. I don't know if the first time was suicide. It seems to me that, suicide, from what I've been able to pick up by the dozens of experiences that I've interviewed, is not the way forward, because apparently, we choose this life, as it were. We want to learn certain life lessons, and suicide is not the way to go. You end up having to face some of your demons anyway. So what would you say to someone like that who's so desperately unhappy by coming back that they want to do something, that's really counterproductive in terms of their own development and their own path to awakening?
That's a very good question. And obviously it's a futile effort, because everything that you've done, if you commit suicide, eventually you have to do it again. Prior to, I don't know if anybody has learned about pre-birth memories, we choose some of our challenges. Doesn't mean we don't have free will, we do, but we choose our life because it's helpful to evolve spiritually and to fulfill our purpose. So needless to say, committing suicide is the worst choice that you can do. The best thing that you could do if you feel that bad, do something about it, get the support system so that you get help. But committing suicide is absolutely the worst choice that you could make.
You mentioned something also about experiences divorce rate being 75. I've heard as high 75%. I've heard as high as 80%, actually. I mean, it's a huge divorce rate. And it's not. You mentioned that if you know of an experiencer who's having marital problems, they really need to go to a counselor who knows about the near-death experience, because it can be horrific otherwise. Can you speak a little bit to that? I'm curious.
Absolutely. I had somebody come to my practice who came to me because after his near-death experience, he was in the process of getting divorced, and he was very upset about it. He was not happy. He was very upset that on top of everything, his wife wanted to file for divorce. And he was at that time going to a marriage counselor with his wife. And his counselor was very dismissive of his experience. So to make a long story short, he wished he hadn't gone to him because he made it worse, and they had ended up getting divorced, which is very sad. So if you don't find somebody who is knowledgeable, don't. It could make it worse potentially.
Right, because I guess the person who's not trained in the near-death experience, or at least has no knowledge, is really just, as you said, not recognizing that experience, which is, of course, at the core of it all. It's because of the experience that the person is now very different, transformed, different set of values, etc. So how can you deny that experience and think that you're helping someone? So yeah, it just keeps having repercussions, doesn't it? That people's a lack of awareness of the near-death experience just can do so much damage in so many different ways. On average, if this is something you can answer, do you know how many sessions it takes with you for somebody to reintegrate? Do they ever fully reintegrate?
Oh yeah, of course. How many? It's impossible. It's a process, and everyone is different. We're all different depending on how long ago the person had the experience. But does it help? Yes, of course it does. Yeah. How many sessions? I don't know.
Are there particular sort of predispositions in a client that might help them make a faster recovery or a faster integration? Are there clients who just, from their particular perspective, it's going to be super hard because they are so sort of closed down to certain things, and others that are more open? Does that make a difference?
Well, again, everyone is different depending on their experience, depending on their after effects, depending on how long ago they had the experience, and if initially they were rejected and or believed. You see, it depends. If it's somebody which I have seen, somebody who recently had the experience, and they're like, you know, what the heck is going on? And they were believed initially. It's easier because they already have a support system. They were believed. So they don't have to deal with the trauma of having been dismissed or pathologized and having had to shut down for years. So it depends. Everyone is different.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would make sense. Some support's better than nothing. Now, there are how many therapists in the United States? Maybe you have some idea. I don't know. I'm just throwing this out there. Would you say have had some training? They're therapists and then they are very sympathetic to the near-death experience, and they've actually undergone some training. I know ACISTE has offered training. How many therapists would you say are out there that have this particular skill set?
That's a good question. I don't know a number off the top of my head, but very few, unfortunately. There ACISTE wants to create a curriculum, but that will take time, curriculum to bring it to different universities. So more people who are becoming psychologists or social workers, they have this information, this knowledge. And I believe IANDS is also, because I'm in the mental health committee for IANDS, we're hoping to have CEUs for any therapist to take CEUs so they learn more about the phenomenon and the after effects. And it takes time. I mean, it's not a quick fix that a therapist just, okay, you're done.
Right.
There's a lot to learn. But like right now, for the person who just asked, IANDS, I believe just in the last few days, put on their website a number of therapists in different states, unfortunately not that many, that as far as IANDS is concerned, they are prepared to work with experiencers. And also they could go to the ACISTE website for the ones that are still working. I mean, that website that list needs to be upgraded as well.
We have just a couple more minutes. We have about 3 minutes left. Would you like to say some closing words?
Thank you, Angie. One thing that I want to say is that there are ways to integrate your experience. But one thing that I feel very strongly, this is a personal thing and that I have seen, is all about love. Is all about love. And that means many things. Joy, being patient, tolerance, going with the flow. I mean, love encompasses all the positive thoughts and feelings. And if you feel bad for somebody, just send them love. Send them love. And what's going on in the Middle East, just send the victims love. That's what I feel. It's all about love. Even small acts of kindness, the thoughts that you have, the prayers of love and wellness.
And also, I think about any experiences, knowing that there are such wonderful people as yourself who specialize in helping them reintegrate has to be a source of hope and faith.
Thank you, Angie.
They can actually, there are people out there who understand what you've gone through and who actually can help you integrate, so they needn't despair. And the world is becoming more sensitive to it. So thank you so very much, Diana, for the wonderful work that you're doing.
Oh, you're welcome, Angie.
And for sharing your expertise with us this afternoon. It's been very, very interesting, and I think it's helped a number of people. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. We will be back in February again with another near-death experiencer sharing their story. And those newcomers, please come to our group again and reach out to me, and I'll be happy to put you on my email address so that you can keep in touch with other things that we're doing. But anyway,
thank you, Angie.
Thank you so much. I'll be in touch with you, Diana. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. See you next time. Bye-bye now.